Hi, everybody. We did our project on the natural order hypothesis, and this was done by Julie Soban.
And Rebecca Emkin. So some background information on the natural order hypothesis is that it is a relatively new hypothesis emerging in 1983 in a book called The Natural Approach. This hypothesis piggybacked off of the work and research done by Dulé and Burt when it was observed that grammatical morphemes were acquired before others in a particularly set way. This hypothesis states that language acquisition occurs in a predetermined or natural order, with some aspects of the language or grammar structures being acquired before others.
One of the scholars behind this hypothesis is named Stephen Krashen. He was an education professor at the University of Southern California, and he wrote over 20 books, but some of the relevant ones are Second Language Acquisition and Second Language Learning in 1981. And then our hypothesis appears in The Natural Approach, Language Acquisition in the Classroom in 1983. He also wrote Under Attack, The Case Against Bilingual Education in 1997. The co-author of this book is named Tracy Terrell. He was a Spanish professor at the University of California and an applied linguist. He thought that a language learner can grasp the essentials of what a native speaker speaks to him in genuine communicative context and can respond to the native speaker in such a fashion that the message is efficiently and correctly interpretable. So this is the cover of the book. And one of the main points presented in this work are the 4 stages that speech emerges, which are pre-production, early production, speech emergence, and intermediate fluency. And these will be expanded on later in the presentation.
So some of the core principles, the main one is that students learn language in a predetermined sequence. The acquisition order timeline cannot be sped up or changed in any way. For example, no amount of grammar drills or grammar exercises will speed up learning. The hypothesis applies to both adults and children acquiring another language, and it applies to both first and second language acquisition. While there is still a natural order of acquisition, this order differs a little bit when acquiring language 1 and 2. For example, the order process of acquiring English as a first language will be slightly different when a student is acquiring English as a second language. And the natural order hypothesis is less about the grammar and more about the communication.
Some critiques of this hypothesis are that learning a second language is a lot different than learning a first language, and they're not exactly comparable according to some critics. Other critics have said that linguists don't have enough information about the order of acquisition in every structure in every language, and that they only have information on a few structures in a few languages. So around the board, it's not applicable to all languages and all learners. They also said the order is not rigidly obeyed by every acquirer. There's some individual variation. So that definitely has to be taken into account. And it's one critique that has been brought up a lot in the research that we did.
The application of theory in the classroom. The natural order hypothesis is independent of teaching in the classroom, meaning that deliberate teaching of a language has no effect on the predetermined order the students will use to acquire that language. A student acquiring a language cannot master a grammatical structure that a teacher is presenting and use it conversationally when that child is not ready to acquire it based on this order. Knowing this will aid teachers in understanding the implications when teaching reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Teachers need to be patient and cognizant of this theory as ELLs naturally progress through the order. Additionally, it is essential for teachers to understand their students' WIDA levels and where along the process of the language acquisition their ELL student is. Some quick examples of these implications seen in the classroom are when teaching reading and writing, students acquire the present tense ing, like Billy is walking, before acquiring the possessive S, like Sarah's pen is black. Also, when teaching listening and speaking, students will acquire the structure of asking and answering yes and no questions before asking and answering the what, where, when, why questions. Some examples of this acquisition of grammar, the sequencing is first is presenting those present progressive verb tenses like the INGs and the past progressive verb tenses like she was singing. Plurals like dogs is next. And next is the conjugation of the verb to be, such as am, is, was, are, been, were. Then irregular simple past tense verbs, he caught the ball. Articles like a, an, and the. Regular simple past tense verbs like they moved or he climbed. Simple present verb tenses like he studies. And then possessive nouns such as Sarah's pen. And here's a little more depth into Krashen's 4 stages of that language acquisition. That pre-production stage with the listening and the gestures, the student has no acquisition of language yet, and that's how they're communicating is through listening and gestures. The early production state, students have at least one word of the language they are learning up to short phrases. The speech emergence stage, students are able to speak and write sentences and communicate with long phrases, but they still will have some grammatical errors. Intermediate stage is the when students are more fluent using the language, speaking, reading, writing, listening. They can use more complex sentences and they have fewer pronunciation and grammatical errors.
Today, we are going to do synonyms. Okay, so instead of saying I jumped on the trampoline, what else could I say? Don't try to force linguistic structures that your ELLs are not ready to acquire based on that natural order, predetermined set of sequences. Instead, know where they are in that progress and adapt your lesson plans to fit that. So if you know that one of your ELs has gotten up to plurals, then that's what you're going to keep teaching from there. If the other ELL has all the way up through the articles and is reading simple sentences with articles, then that's where you're going to go. But we can't teach linguistic structures when our ELLs are not ready to acquire that type of language yet. So keep being patient and helping those kiddos progress through that natural order. He is in the... Good job. Can you say it one more time? He is... Did he skip? What did he do? He is in the... Good job. Skipping in the trees. Good job.
So in conclusion of our presentation, the 2 questions that we would like to ask are, what are the core principles of the natural order SLA theory? Also, we would like to know which parts of the presentation helped you or did not help you to understand the natural order SLA theory. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you for watching.